So Chuck knows all about this. Manny has kept him informed. And I think it's fair to say Chuck has said that he's sympathetic to the idea. And if Manny can get a relatively small number of First Nations to sign up for it, and it might only have to be 5 or 10, that Chuck has said that, as Minister of Indian Affairs, he will introduce the legislation. Well, now he can't guarantee it because it has to be approved by cabinet, but he will attempt to get this legislation. And while I'm out talking about the book, Manny is meeting with First Nations leaders and trying to build support for it internally. So this is the crucial thing. We want this to be not a top-down reform imposed by the will of Parliament on people who were never consulted about it and who don't want it. We want this to be a First Nations-led initiative. That is, that there have to be some First Nations who come forward and say, we want to do this, make this change, and actually become owners of our own land. I think Manny will get, I think he already has 5. I mean, he's Shuswap, and there's like 16 Shuswap First Nations. I think he's probably already got 5 within his own people. But he wants to get more, as many as possible. He doesn't have to get a huge number. How quickly could this happen? Well, drafting is going to be complicated. I bet it could take a year just to draft this thing. I've tried to keep it simple, but there are many complexities in it that a lot of them I don't even understand myself. Lawyers are the only ones who understand them or claim to. So it'll be difficult legislation to draft, I think. But let's say if Manny can get a group to come forward, and then 2010 is consultation year, 2011 could be drafting year. Maybe it could be introduced in Parliament in 2012. That's kind of an optimistic forecast, but something to hope for. Once it's in Parliament, I think it actually can pass, because Manny and I have talked to various political leaders. Manny, of course, has been speaking to the minister. Behind the scenes, he's also spoken to senior Liberals like Paul Martin. I don't know if he's actually, they keep changing their leaders, but he has spoken to Liberal leaders. I spoke to Gilles Duceppe when he was in Calgary about it, gave a copy of the book and explained the general idea. And he said, oh yes, absolutely, why not? He said, we already are doing this in Quebec in the James River Agreement. I mean, you've already got enough to pass. It would be great to have all parties supporting it, but if the NDP staged the walkout, I mean, it wouldn't really matter. It would be enough to pass it. It really is just, you've got to have the Liberals and the Conservatives on side to make this work. But I think you probably can get all parties. So that's not to say it will pass quickly, because we all know in a time of minority government things happen. We have an election, Parliament gets prorogued, the timetable gets wiped, what do they call it, the agenda gets order paper. The order paper gets erased, you have to start over. So, it could take a while to get this passed. But when I look at the future, I mean, I really do see a pathway by which this could happen. Not for all First Nations, initially only for a few. But I think that's better, because I think First Indians have suffered a lot from sort of gigantic top-down things imposed upon them. I think it's better for the kind of experimental process, and voluntary. Those who want take the step, and then those who hang back get to observe, and we see whether it works. Whether maybe it doesn't work the way it's expected. Maybe the legislation will need to be improved in some way. But there'll be. We're playing a very long game here. We're talking about decades and centuries to try and unwind the mess that has been created. So this is not a magic wand. This won't solve all problems. It won't even solve most problems. But it will help people living on some reserves to do better, much better economically. And I'll just make this my concluding note. remember that there are more and more reserves today which are potentially very valuable. I mentioned this in CNET. But there are a lot of reserves, more than you might think today, that are within or immediately adjacent to major cities. You have the Squamish people in Vancouver, for example. They have reserve land right at the foot of the Lionsgate Bridge on the north side there. I mean, think how much that land is worth. But the Musqueam Band is in Vancouver. Kamloops Band is right next to the city of Kamloops. West Bank in Kelowna. I mean, on and on and on. I could list off dozens of First Nations that have land that is potentially very valuable, either for a location or perhaps because they're sitting on top of our oil sands, be another scenario. But more and more there are First Nations that are potentially wealthy. So what I think we have to do is we have to unlock the door. Let's make it possible for them to realize the potential value of this land that they have. So let's get, I mean, what we have to do as a country is get out of the way, I think, and give them the opportunities that we all enjoy. We all are able to buy a home. It's easy if you have a job and some income. There's no particular legal barriers if you qualify for a mortgage and so on. Almost everybody does it at some point in their life, but without a reserve, it's not that way. So that's what we're trying to do in this book, so I'm hopeful. Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'd like to say I'm a conservative. I'm never optimistic, but I'm always hopeful.